we have that little, awkward moment here of, you know, conversations that everyone's going to hear. Let's see. I'm going to watch this in YouTube.
Mike.
All right. Yep. Here we go. So it seems as though everyone should be able to hear us now. I want to. Oh, maybe not. Oh, tech.
I think we're good now, yeah.
All right, we're good. It showed up on yours?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. I'm so sorry, everybody, for the technical difficulties. And I'm going to ask you for your forgiveness. So please forgive me. And you can know that I'm authentically sorry because if you're really sorry about something, you ask for forgiveness. So whenever anybody actually says, I'm sorry to you all, and says, and doesn't ask for forgiveness, you can be like, you're a liar. Because the person who's really sorry will indeed ask for forgiveness and then desire to change. That's the nature of repentance. But anyway, I am Tim Freitas. This is my channel, The Garden of English. If you have not already subscribed to my channel, please note that you should because it's the easiest way that you could support me. However, to my left, I think, yeah, you're on my left, on my screen at least, right? But to this side of me is Beth Hall, right? And Beth, why don't you tell us a little about your channel while I actually pull up a couple images here. So Beth, take it away.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Beth Hall, also known as Coach Hall Writes on YouTube. I do AP Lang tutorial videos as well. So I saw a couple of shout outs in the chat, so thank you guys. Tonight, we're just going to be reviewing for your digital exam tomorrow. So if you guys have questions, we're going to try to go through the exam in order, starting with multiple choice and then the essays. So feel free to leave any questions you have in the chat. I already saw some really good ones, and we're going to kind of monitor that as well.
Awesome. And I'm super thrilled because we do have another guest who's like right down, here for me, right? And Tom, I'm just thrilled that you're willing to join up with us here. So tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll actually get into what we're doing here. What we're going to do, well, I'll get into what we're doing in a minute. But yeah, take it away, Tom. Tell us about you.
Okay, I'm Tom Catterett. I teach at West Potomac High School in Alexandria, Virginia. In Fairfax
Shout out
County.
to the Wolverines, right?
Yes. DC metro area. Nice reference. Yeah. We do not go Wolverines from Red Dawn, however.
Yeah.
Or at least, because most of the kids don't even know the movie, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I teach AP Lang. I've been teaching AP Lang for about 5 years now. I'm an AP reader as well.
Yeah.
I also teach English 10 Honors as a pre-AP class and a couple other things. And I'm excited to also tell you that next year I'll be teaching the nature of knowledge, an elective based on the International Baccalaureate Theory of Knowledge class, except we're an AP school, and essentially an epistemology class.
Oh, that's right.
In high school, yes.
That's right up my alley for sure.
Yes.
So, what we're going to do, right, as Coach Hall said, we're going to go over just the test for tomorrow, folks. I'm going to actually tell you all to please put, your questions in the chat, but please note, we've already got about 403 people viewing right now. Last time we got up to about 2,000, but even with 403, those chat questions are going to fly through. So Coach and I will monitor, and then Tom, if you can actually pull up YouTube on your second screen.
I'm doing that now.
Oh, good. When watch those chats, we're going to try to get those. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually go through the portions of the test, and we're going to give test-taking strategies. Some of them will be related to the online exam. Other ones will just be like, hey, here are test-taking strategies for you to think about. We will clarify the order of the test, but we're going to start with multiple choice, and then we'll actually change our essay order because the essays are reordered for the online version of the exam. So what we're going to do is this. I'm going to open it up here for you, Coach Hall, to start, and then Tom, we're going to go to you, but I'm going to ask for right now, what are the best tips that you can give kids for dealing with multiple choice? So Coach Hall, why don't you take that? I'm going to scour the comments while you do. Tom, when she's done, why don't you give us your best tips for multiple choice, even if you repeat them, and I'll finish up with mine.
All right, awesome. So first of all, I know some of you are stressing about multiple choice, and I totally get it. It's okay. So just to clarify, you have 45 questions to answer in an hour. And because it's a digital exam, you're going to need to pace yourself. And so it's going to be really important that for the digital exam that you don't move forward without answering the question, because if you do, you can't go back to it. And I believe that's probably just to prevent some kind of cheating or something, but that does add, I think, a layer of stress to the test.
Yeah.
So just make sure that you're, reading the question carefully and really paying attention to what they're asking. And, use the process of elimination to get rid of those answer choices are wrong. But also just a general bit of advice. Don't stress out if a passage seems hard, because I know sometimes students kind of get defeated if they feel like the language is really unapproachable or something, but you're not done with the test. Yeah. And so even if you think it's hard, it doesn't mean that you're getting the answers wrong. And if it's hard for you, it's probably hard for everybody else too. So more of like a mental health tip there, but just kind of stay in the moment and just be careful as you're going through. I know for a lot of my students, they honestly prefer the writing questions. So if that's one of your strengths, kind of know that those questions are going to be alternating in throughout, and just, really make sure that you're, I guess, being very careful. I know that's not like the most helpful advice, but I do think with the digital test, there could be a little bit more room for error than the paper test. So I would just say, make sure you're like keeping track of your time and what you're doing.
Yeah. Now, Tom, I'm going to ask you a quick question about the multiple choice thing that's kind of shown up in the chat here, right? So I'm seeing a lot of kids in here asking about, what if I'm a slow reader? I mean, test day is tomorrow. Let's be real here. But like, what if a student is like, I'm a slow reader. What do I do when it comes to like reading on the test? Do you have anything like any tips about speed or like what to look for in particular? Because we have to read the whole passage. We know that. Sure. But like, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, certainly give the passage a good read as it comes up. If I know how the UI works, the user interface, they're always going to have the passage in front of them with the question, right?
Yep.
All right. So that's actually a good thing, because what will happen is, some of the particular questions will focus, should sentence 21 go before sentence, yada, yada, or yada, yada. You've got the passage right there when it comes to the writing section of the multiple choice. And the drafts are usually that you're working with in the writing sections of the test are usually not very long.
Right.
Now, of course, the reading comprehension or the reading passages, go through that passage once, just to get it into your head. If there were particular parts that you were having problems with, just hope that it kind of soaked into your brain.
Right.
I would say immediately jump into the questions, because again, you've got the passage right in front of you. You don't have to worry about jumping back and forth from the questions. I mean, in a way, it's there's sort of an advantage. You've only got one question in front of you at any given time.
Right.
You're not stressing about the other, 12 or 11, 10 that are coming up with that particular reading passage, and you've already got the ones behind you. There's a certain freedom in being so restrained, I think, this time around with the multiple choice. I know that's kind of hard probably for you guys to see out there, but in other words, all you can do at that moment is focus on that particular question. Now, when it says, in this particular part of the passage, in this particular part of the paragraph, what do you think this means? Make sure you have read part of the passage. Sorry, part of the passage that is before that, line that's being asked about, and afterwards, to make sure you're seeing everything in context, opposed to the whole, you don't necessarily need to go through and reread the whole thing.
Right.
But just don't focus on that one line. Like, all I have to do is jump to the questions, not really read that passage, and then go back and forth. That is not going to work for you.
I really appreciate some of the advice that you gave there too, with the idea of like, kind of just go through it and hope that it's soaked in. But honestly, folks, if you're a slow reader, or if you're struggling with a little bit of comprehension in a passage, power through. Don't give up. Keep going. Yeah. Because if you can't get part of it, you can get more. I'm going to give a quick tip about the slow reader there, who's worried about not getting things. One of the things that I do with my students, especially when reading is a little bit hard, I tell them you should hashtag your reading. And what I do here is this, to show them this. I bring up an Instagram post that has a bunch, like 40 hashtags on it and a picture. And I'm like, guys, tell me what happened that night. And like, when I show them the picture. But I only let them read the hashtags. And they narrate my whole night for me to a T. And I'm like, now y'all are telling me that you can actually make cohesive sentences and meaning from hashtags that aren't even like complete ideas. But when I put complete ideas in front of you, you're like, I can't do it. I have no idea, right? So what I mean by that, folks, is that while you're reading, if you've got some scratch paper, when you feel like you've read a few lines, throw a little hashtag summary there, right? Pretend you're on Twitter and you're like, oh, I got to get the main idea here. Hashtag that, boom, keep going. And that's going to actually help you consider where you are in the text, and it will help you consider the ideas that are there as well. But I do agree, right? Power through that reading. Don't get slogged down. Keep going through and get the whole piece in there. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Coach, before I talk about a couple tips, is there anything you want to add?
No, I agree with those for sure. Absolutely. So a couple of things I'm seeing in the chat, people wanted to know how many passages there are. So just to kind of clear listening.
Yeah.
Now there's like technically, I guess 5 passages, right? But we've
Yep.
got some that are reading and some that are writing.
Right.
And you'll know the difference because the reading passages are longer and those are more comprehension based. The writing passages tend to be shorter with fewer questions. Those are more editing based.
Yeah.
And I think those tend to be a little bit less stressful, to be honest.
The other
At
thing
least
too.
me, anyway, I would take the writing questions all the time. Versus
Yeah.
That's just me.
But to be clear, one of the differences between the writing questions, though, kids are asking, I see it about the SAT, like, are they like the SAT writing questions? The answer is no, because the SAT writing question is a lot about grammar, and the AP writing questions are actually about rhetorical choice. Okay, so that's one of the things that kids have to realize. They're not they're not being asked to deal with pronoun antecedent agreement. They're not being asked to deal with grammar. They're being asked to, does this belong here or not? Another
Thank
thing,
God.
I know, right? Another thing I want kids to realize, right, is that you're going to have 5 reading passages, but they did change it up for the digital exam. So on the paper exam, it's the rhetorical analysis reading passage, rhetorical analysis reading passages, and then the 3 writing passages. Tomorrow, folks, you will not see it that way. You are still going to have 5 passages, but the first one is going to be the writing type of passage where you need to kind of do that kind of editing and revision. Then you're going to have your 2 rhetorical analysis reading passages, and then you'll finish with 2 writing passages. Now, don't ask me why they changed it. I have no idea. I'm not the College Board, nor do I play it on TV. But that is going to be what you need to be prepared for that. Okay? Any other tips from you, Tom, about multiple choice before I give a couple last ones, and then we move on to synthesis questions and whatnot?
Just key thing. Remember that you're, again, I think most folks have found the writing to be a little bit easier. So you're going to start off with one of those, and that the 2 reading passages are going to be in the middle, and then you kind of skate with those last 2 writing ones. Although every so often one of the writing ones will catch you. It's just, just basically don't freak out. Don't leave anything unanswered. You don't get penalized for any wrong answers. Guess wildly. And chances are good that you're going to end up guessing well.
Right.
So.
Now, a couple things here, right? Please don't spend more than 2 minutes on a question. In fact, I typically tell my kids to limit it to one. Right, not even like one at the tops, like 1.5 tops, 2 at the absolute maximum, because you're just bogging yourself down. Another thing about multiple choice is that if you were to YouTube Marco Learning, they are going to go live at 9 p.m. tonight, and I love Marco for test prep, and they're going to actually focus on multiple choice for the digital exam. So when we're done here today, Marco Learning, YouTube, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's totally free. You just go into your search bar, Marco Learning, and it will be live for AP Lang review for tomorrow. And so please note that. I'm going to just toss out 2 more pieces of advice about multiple choice here. Do not see...
Yeah, just to remind everybody, we're going to go through the exam in order. So right now we're focusing on multiple choice, and we are keeping note of the synthesis, rhetorical analysis, and argument questions for sure. We're not ignoring you.
So I see someone's yelling at me right now about rhetorical choices.
Don't you see this person repeating the questions like, we're going to get there.
We'll get there, we promise.
Patience.
So anyway, a couple things here, right? When you get to your multiple choice, because you think about process of elimination, when you narrow it down to 2 answers, which is what most of you can do, okay, you want to try to eliminate the lead distractor. Now, the lead distractor is the answer that is meant to distract you from the right one. And there are 3 common parts of a lead distractor, 3 common things to look for. And the first one is the lead distractor has some true information, but also some false information. Now, the reason why kids fall for this so much is because they notice the true information, but then they think that they may have misunderstood the false information because they're like, oh, I didn't read it like that. Oh my gosh, maybe I'm wrong. That's a lack of confidence. You're actually right. That information is false. So if you notice that there might be something that is seemingly false, even though there's something true in there, it's a lead distractor. Get rid of that. Another common aspect of a lead distractor is that the answer is actually entirely right, but it's not right in the context of that particular question stem. So if you're looking at the question stem and you're like, okay, I know that answer is right, but it's not right for that question, boom, that's a lead distractor because you're like, it's right, but it's not right for that question. The last type is the answer to your multiple choice question. Sometimes a lead distractor is a more abstract version of it, and you want the one that's more precise. So for example, if I tell a joke, right, and you all laugh, that's actually a pathetic appeal. But pathetic appeal is a super broad term. So if the question were to say, what does Tim Freitas do to get people to laugh? And one of the answers is tell a joke. And the other answer that you've narrowed it down to is, appeal to emotions. Well, the telling of the joke is a much more precise way of labeling that. And so therefore it is the better answer because you are answering these questions with the best answer. Okay? So you want to know those 3 types of lead distractors. One last tip for the multiple choice, especially for tomorrow for you all, because you're taking this online. Go into the system tonight, click on the question mark up in the top right-hand corner, and look at the key code commands. Because the key code commands, if you hit Control-Shift-1, that'll answer A. Control-Shift-2, that'll answer B. That saves you all the time of moving your cursor around your screen. There's also a key command to pull up the annotation element on the screen itself. And so because of that, if you know those quick key commands, if you jot them down, then you'll be able to just pull that right up and you won't spend so much time like go over here, click that open, click back down here, highlight my text, type it in. You could just use the key commands for it. So I would encourage you to use those key commands. Totally excellent. But other parts about the multiple choice exam, you'll definitely want to check out Marco because that is, they're going to really work on that as well. Any final things about multiple choice before we move on? Let's talk about synthesis. Yes?
Just one quick thing. Someone asked what a question stem is, which we get caught up in teacher lingo. So
I
question
know.
stem is literally the question. So you have the question stem, which is the question, and then the answer choices. So when we say question stem, we literally just mean the question they're asking you. That's all. But good question.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, Tom, were you going to say something?
No.
Someone just asked if you're allowed to have notes like that on test day. Here's what I can tell you. You're allowed to have a piece of scrap paper in front of you, but what I would do is the second I get into my test, I would click on that help bar and then I would just write down the key commands. I would take 20 seconds to do it, the key commands for the answer and the key commands for the annotation guide. Boom. And someone asked me to repeat the key commands. They're different for Mac and PC and Chromebook. So you're going to want to go in and look at the exact key commands that the College Board provided for you. But you can log into that tonight and check that out. Log into your demo, and they're right up there in that question mark there. Okay? So please note such things.
And really quickly, because I saw a teacher actually comment this in the chat a while back. Like, kids, if you have not logged in yet and like played around with this stuff, you need to do that. Because I forgot what the term she used was, but something about like you have to register or confirm your test.
Setup, exam setup.
Yes.
Something.
Yes.
There's something that you all need to do if you haven't done it, and you need to do it by midnight. So
Yeah, my students out there who are logging in, they had me lecturing them about that for about 10 or 15 minutes. Like, and now take 10 or 15 minutes because it literally, as you click on it, it's like a 2-minute video and you have to let the video run out. But I mean, it's obviously worth seeing, and then you click next, boom, it's set up. You don't want to be doing that tomorrow. I mean, I guess you could at 11:30, Eastern time, but do it now.
Well, I'll answer one more multiple choice question too. It says, because I saw this show up a couple times, are they similar to the SAT questions? The answer is no. And the reason why is because these multiple choice questions are not reading comprehension and they're not grammar based. What they are is they are rhetorically, and like it's rhetorical analysis. Even the writing questions, it's about the rhetoric of what people are doing. Okay, so please note that that's one of the things that you want to know about this. General test taking practices are good things to remember, but you have to know a bit about rhetoric and argumentation in order to do these pretty well. Okay, now
can I add to that really quickly?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, so because I think there's some confusion about the SAT and the AP. So on the SAT, there are some questions where they ask you, should the writer add or delete this sentence? Should they move this sentence? Those are actually somewhat similar, but what we're not trying to get you to practice is you don't need to know where the comma goes.
Right.
You don't need to know where the semicolon goes. That's all SAT or ACT stuff. But on the SAT, if there is a question stem, those questions are sort of similar to the AP test. They might not be as hard, but so it's not like you've never seen these questions before, but you're not going to be asked about grammatical questions tomorrow. So don't bother studying all those things.
Yeah, no. And then I saw something that I was like, oh man, I totally forgot. And this stream will be replayable. Now, for as we switch to essays here, and we'll try to get through as many questions as we can, but as we talk through this as well, okay? Tomorrow on your electronic exam, they have changed the order of the essays from what it is on paper. So tomorrow you are going to write your argument essay first. You have to. The moment you press submit, you cannot go back. So folks, do not think you can preview all the questions. You can't. You have to see your argument prompt and you have to write it in full. When you're done, you're going to then press submit, and then you'll get your synthesis prompt. And then when you're done with your synthesis, you'll press submit and you'll get your rhetorical analysis. Now, the most important thing you need to remember is that you have 2 hours and 15 minutes to write all 3 essays. All 3 essays. It's not 2 hours and 15 minutes per essay. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes for all 3. So because they are going to start with the argument essay, we're going to talk about argument first and the tips that we have for argument. And because we're 3 different teachers, we might have 3 different tips. But please note that we're all well versed in what we're doing here, and there's no one way to, I guess, skin a cat, although it sounds kind of gross. But I don't like cats anyway. I like my reptiles. So please note that our tips may differ a little bit, but please note that we're all experienced teachers, and you can pick what works for you. Okay. The other thing too is, like I said, we'll start with argument, then we'll move to synthesis, then we'll move to rhetorical analysis. And when we get to rhetorical analysis, we'll finally talk about those rhetorical choices that I see coming up over and over to the point where people are going to yell at us here. So argument, Tom, we're going to actually start with you. What are the, let's say, like 3 or 4 main things that we really want to think about in order to own the argument exam? And then folks, the argument portion of the test. And then, folks, whenever you have some argument questions, toss them in the chat. Coach and I will try to pick it up while Tom's talking, and then we'll go from there. All right, take it away, Tom. What do you got?
Okay, before I jump into argument, though, Tim, I have a quick question for you.
Yep.
And Coach Hall, you may already know this, or you might not. The way the 3 essays are structured, we know that the argument's coming first, and you have the synthesis second, and then RA first, or third. Sorry. Oh, RA's third, rhetorical analysis. They typically have 15 minutes to look at the documents for the synthesis essay. Do we know if these students will have access to the synthesis essay from the very beginning of the essay portion, or it's they literally got to finish the argument first and then they go to the synthesis?
They're going to finish the argument first, and then they'll get all the synthesis stuff to have access to through that process. So,
but they'll still have the 2 hour and 15 minute timer. It will start at 135 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, all right. So there you go, folks who are wondering that. I had no idea how that was going to happen. So with an argumentative essay, the one key thing that you want to do is you're going to be asked a question like, what was it 2 years ago? There are people who say things are overrated. Yeah. What do you think is overrated? And provide, the claims and evidence as to why that might be. That's the key thing that you have to remember is when you are answering this question, you have to go in, you have to establish what your thesis is. Remember, as we've hammered probably every single teacher, you have to have what they call the defensible thesis, a thesis that you build your line of reasoning from or around or however you want to perceive it. So you have to have an opinion about something, or you have to figure out how you're going to have an opinion about something. Fall in love with the question, even if you hate it. And that will help you, come up with whatever that thesis is. And then you've got to figure out what your, 2 or 3 main points are going to be. I mean, yeah, this sounds an awful lot like you're going to be writing the standard 5-paragraph essay that you probably did back in the 8th grade. But that's not what this is. You're figuring out what those claims are that you're going to be making, and then you're going to be coming up with evidence, and the evidence is coming from personal observations. It's coming from the things that you've read. It's coming from essentially your general knowledge of the world. You don't have to be an expert on the people or know anything, obviously, about the argumentative question that you're getting. You just have to be able to formulate an argument on, or take the position and move from there. So that is the key thing. You've got, something we've talked about all year long is you've got to make sure you have a thesis. You've got to have a position. And then you've got to find these things from your own personal experience, your own readings, your own general knowledge of the world to build your argument around that. And it's got to, again, it should probably be, remember that however you throw the 3 things out, you think you know this going in there, but I see it as an AP reader an awful lot where the students will, The following three, or I'm trying to come up with the right words. It is clear that things are overrated because of A, B, and C. Now, when you start developing your essay, you should probably have A, B, and C in a row. You should have an A, B, and a C, as opposed to just a B, then an A, and not a C.
Right.
And that right there is what is, it's just simple organization about the line of reasoning.
Yeah.
I'm probably focusing overly much on the technical things, but these are the kinds of things that come up. These are the kind of things that take you 1 or 2 points lower, in that evidence and commentary section. If you guys remember, you're always going to get that freebie, that 1 point for coming up with your defensible thesis. But that's important. That's a point, and that's literally what your line of reasoning is going to come from.
Yeah.
The key section is those 4 points, evidence and commentary. And you hope you're writing cogently and brilliantly enough that you'll get that sophistication point. But sometimes that may or may not happen. But it's very, very important to keep everything, connected back to the thesis and a line of reasoning to get those 4 key points, to walk out of there with a 5, or to get out of your chair after you've accomplished a 5 out of 6 points on the essay. Because if you get a few 5s and you get about 50% of the multiple choice questions, you're looking at a 4.
Yeah.
At least. All
Yeah.
right. I'm sorry. Maybe I talked a little bit longer.
No. That's quite all right. Right, Coach. We'll defer to you for a couple argument tips, and I'll deal with some. And I see some questions here that I'll deal with in the chat as well.
I was gonna say, I'm trying to answer the chat as well. So if I'm looking down, it's because I'm trying to answer the chat.
Well, do you want to take the chat first, and then I'll answer right now, and then we'll switch?
It doesn't matter. I've been keeping track of them, so I've got a few points I want to make for sure.
Gotcha.
You're getting
Okay.
some good questions.
Awesome. All right. So you take care of it, and Tom, if you want to man the chat too while we're in here, that'd be awesome. All right, Coach, take it away.
So a couple of things in no particular order. We've been asked how many body paragraphs. I have seen students be successful with 2 body paragraphs. I've seen students be successful with 3 body paragraphs. The important thing to me as a teacher is that you have specific evidence, because if you use these general examples, that's going to hurt you based on the rubric. So really develop your ideas with specific evidence, because I have students myself who, like, the timing just doesn't work out. They do 2 body paragraphs. They can't fit in a 3rd, but what they said was really good. So if that applies to you, then I'm personally okay with 2 body paragraphs as long as they're well developed.
Yeah. Actually, Coach, can I interject for just 1 second there?
Sure.
Someone just asked about, okay, well, if I only have 2 body paragraphs and one of them's a counter argument and the other one's my support paragraph, like, what the nonsense, right? And the thing is, though, is that if it's a counter argument paragraph, you're refuting that. So that means that you are dismissing the counter. Well, you're not just dismissing the counter argument, you are actually saying why it's wrong. So that is actually a support paragraph. I think what the student's really asking is, what if I just have a concession paragraph and then a support paragraph where it's like, I concede my limitation of my argument, here's my support, now I'm done. At that point, you look like you're equivocating. And I was actually talking to students just about an hour ago, and in fact, they were Tom students, and they were just absolutely just so kind. So if any of Tom's students are on here, you guys are some of the kindest kids I've ever met. And I told them, I said, is it better to have a counter argument, or is it better to have 2 solid body paragraphs that argue what you're looking for? And I think the latter is the better one. You don't need a counter argument in your argument. You absolutely don't. Even if it fits, you don't need one. So support your argument well. I think that's the better way to do it. But anyway, Coach, back to you.
Yeah, no problem. So you can include a counter argument, but my thought process is it going to advance your argument? Because I've seen some essays where I think the student included it because they were told to, and it just didn't really help the argument. So you as the writer have to decide, is this a choice I need to make? Do I want to have a counterclaim and rebuttal or concession and refutation? Because they can work, but they're not mandatory and they don't always work. So you got to decide, is it convincing? Because you want to be making a strong argument. I'm also seeing questions in the chat about conclusions and are they required? Technically, no, there's nothing in the rubric that says you need one. And your readers will view your essay as a rough draft of sorts anyway. So spelling also not super important. So don't get bogged down with like those little things. In my opinion, the content is what's most important.
All right. I agree, right? I just saw a question in the chat that said, how can I make my thesis more effective? I'm going to answer that, and then I'll deal with some more pointers. And then Tom and Coach, if you have any other argument pointers that pop in, just to interrupt me because I talk too much. First of all, one of the ways that you can make your thesis more effective is to have a subordinating conjunction in it, right? I typically recommend that it be the word because. Now, a lot of you are like, subordinating conjunction, God bless you, right? No, I did not sneeze, okay? I'm going to tell you right now, although we love grandpa, we want to love grammar more, okay? So go look up what subordinated conjunctions are. But the reason why is because if you start with, while this might be the case, boom, here's my argument, that shows that you've kind of thought about the other perspective, but you're going to argue your point all the more. But another thing, too, is that one of the best subordinated conjunctions to use in any thesis for synthesis or argument is the word because. And the reason why is because that unifies what you're going to do. If I'm like, oh, I can't stand Coach Hall because A, B, and C, I'm going to start with paragraph, and I'm going to be like, here's A, here's how I know Coach Hall does A, and here's why this makes it so that I can't stand her. And I hope you all know that is not the case, right? The coach is one of my most favorite YouTube friends, all right? And so please note, like, that's the kind of thing that we're looking at here. But anyway, more advice for argument, Coach, before I jump in.
We have some questions about commentary.
Yeah.
Which I think is important because I think that's probably like the hardest part of any of the essays as a student is the commentary. So I think there's like a lot of tips we could give here, but remember that your commentary is your analysis and you're basically saying like why or so what, like why does what you just said matter? So depending on the prompt, depending on the type of evidence you have, you really want to dig into like the implications of that evidence. So what is it showing us? What is it illustrating or revealing? Things like that. And I generally recommend that we try for more commentary than evidence, just because
at least make them proportionate, right?
Yeah. So if you like info dump too much evidence and then have a little bit of commentary, it's not the right proportions. Mm-hmm. So we want to make sure that like the commentary is your own thought, and that's what we're really looking for. So that's where we want to see the commentary, the analysis as well.
I just saw a question here about evidence, and I'm going to go back to this, right? So Tom, you mentioned specific evidence, and you were like, oh, make sure you have that, right? Now, Tom, I know that you've been a reader. Have you ever read argument before?
Yes, but
okay.
not a significant portion of them. I've read rhetorical analysis and just 2 years running, but they pulled me for one point to do like 100 argumentative for some reason.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So I know that you had mentioned specific evidence. Coach, you did too. And for me, folks, specific evidence, right? I help my kids remember one letter. I just say S cubed. And that means that you pull your evidence from the subjects that you learn about in school. So anything in there can be evidence. You can pull from society, which is like pop culture, technology, or anything like that. Or you could pull from yourself, which would be your own experience or experience from your friends. Somebody asked, right, how do I write specific evidence? Well, specific evidence, right, or an example of it. If I were to say, you know, an example of, you know, sometimes people go to the store and buy stuff, that's not specific evidence. It's a nice little story. But when I'm like, I went to Hannaford and I bought kombucha because I love kombucha, that is specific evidence. Now, I just told the same story. Someone went into the store and someone bought something. But I told it about me and I made it specific. And that's what specific evidence is. So when you think about the evidence you're going to put into your body paragraph, you want to thoroughly describe in detail, not just say people do things or, you know, if you start your evidence with just say someone blah, 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 boom, that's hypothetical right away. You want to say, do I know a story? Do I know something from math class or history or science that I can describe in detail here that can help with that? And then another thing about the commentary, right, is because commentary is explaining how the evidence proves the argument. Okay, so now I'm going to pick on Tom here. So I think Tom's a big jerk now, right? And my evidence is that he's wearing a blue and white shirt. When I provide my commentary, I need to now say, how does the blue and white shirt that Tom is wearing make him a big jerk? And y'all are like, no, Freitas, you're a huge jerk because you're saying that Coach and Tom are jerks, right? But anyway, the how is the commentary factor there. And if you all want to know if you have enough commentary, I'm going to give you one word that you want to remember to put in your commentary over and over. And it's the word because. Because every time you provide commentary, if you say this piece of the evidence highlights whatever your claim is because, it will force you to provide the reasoning that got that out. So the words that you want to have in your commentary are going to be good cause and effect language. Words like because, since, due to, so, thus, for, and as. And the reason why is because I am wearing a blue and white shirt too. Tom, I'm a jerk too. Oh my gosh. So anyway, please note though, right? My point here is that type of language you should see in your commentary over and over, because that's going to make you push out the logical reasoning that you're tying. A lot of times kids will just say, and this proves my claim. But we need them to say, and this proves my claim because. And even if the paper is mechanical, but it has that because there, you can write a mechanical paper and score a 140. You can.
It's true.
Yeah. So that is just one of the things that I wanted to respond to. One other thing I'll respond to, and then I'll open it back up to you guys for a little bit, because like I said, I talk too much, is somebody asked, can you use just your thesis for your intro paragraph? And in my classroom, and my kids score fine every year on the AP exam, when it comes to timed writing, my answer is absolutely yes. I tell my students, don't waste your time on a full intro paragraph, because I've been reading for years, and I almost never, like, I've seen so many examples of kids clearly producing like an intro paragraph for 10 minutes, and then there's one body paragraph to follow. And I'm like, if you put that 10 minutes into your second body paragraph, because the person already knew her, his or her thesis, put the thesis there as its own intro, and then write your body paragraphs. That's how you're going to maximize your points. And so, but please note, Tom, I'm under the impression that you're like, here, I want my kids to write a well-developed intro that's kind of sophisticated. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, this is like mind-altering to me that but it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So please note, I'm going to tell you where that came from. The former curriculum director for the College Board is a friend of mine, and vice president of curriculum and instruction or something like that, right? And I did a session with him one time, and he was like, I tell my students to spend more time on the conclusion than their intro, because that's the last thing the reader will see. That's the last thing the reader will see. And if they write a conclusion that expands, they're not going to forget it. They might forget the intro paragraph. So he's like, I always tell my kids, thesis, body paragraphs, and then if you're going to add another paragraph, make it a strong conclusion, because you get the most points out of the thesis and body paragraphs anyway. So because of that, you're maximizing your efficiency by writing the thesis and your body paragraphs. And if you're going to just write a summary conclusion, don't even put it on there. It's not even worth it, to be honest with you. You could totally get the 5 points for your thesis and your body paragraphs. But once again, this is my way of doing it where I've had success, but there are plenty of other teachers that do it very differently that have also had success, and Tom is one of them. So I wanted to make sure that you all realize that there's more than one way to do this.
I think we need t-shirts. I'm #team short intro. I tell my students, stop wasting my time. Just tell me, give me a couple sentences and then your thesis, but I just really want to get to your body paragraphs, which I know is not everybody's opinion, but I've seen kids write half a page of an intro, and I'm like, this is good, but all you did was take all this time to earn the thesis points. That's it. Yeah. So just my personal opinion. But we did have a couple questions that I think we should address before we move on. Yep. One is line of reasoning, and the other is about personal experience. Okay. So line of reasoning, a couple quick tips. For me, I think the order of your paragraphs and the order of your evidence matters. And I actually encourage my students to take a second before they actually start writing their essay to kind of do a quick outline, like bullet points of something that only makes sense to them probably, but just what are your main ideas? And then what's your evidence going to be and then also what's the order? Because sometimes our first instinct isn't always the best order. So take a second to figure out, let's say you're using historical examples. Is it better to include them in chronological order? I've seen a couple kids do it in reverse chronological order actually really successfully, but are we going to start with a broad, sort of historical example and then move to current events or personal experience? Think about your order. And then as you're writing, include those appropriate transitions to kind of guide your reader, because as the reader, we don't want to be jumping through your essay. We want to be guided through it stylistically. So transitions are important, including your topic sentences, just kind of, guiding us through those main ideas. Yeah. And as far as personal experience goes, when I first started teaching, I had been told to tell students, don't write about personal experience. So I just said, okay, don't write about personal experience. The more I've taught, the more I realized that personal experience can be a relevant form of evidence, because some of the things we read in class, the author's talking about personal experience. But I think we want to make sure that we're choosing relevant personal experience it's clear, sort of like the clear backstory, I guess. Like, you know, we don't need to know like your whole life story to understand this one piece of evidence, but we do need to understand a little bit. And usually it needs to focus on like some kind of personal growth or change. So really connect it back to the prompt itself. And one, I think, pretty good example of this is on the released essays from the College Board, the Exploring the Unknown prompt. One of the essays that scored really well has a paragraph where the student's talking about like a ropes course or something, and that was their Exploring the Unknown. But then it led to a love of ropes courses or climbing, whatever it was. So it wasn't just, oh, I did it this one time and it worked out. It was more meaningful because the student continued with that hobby or sport or whatever. So we want to make sure if we're writing about personal experience that it's meaningful.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
No, I think that's great. Do you want to add anything, Tom, before I jump in?
No, I think that's fine. I was answering some of the questions in the chat.
Yeah.
You know, again, I have often said, you know, don't spend too much time on your intro, but your intro, if nothing else, serves as a roadmap for you.
Yep.
And in other words, as you're introducing your argument.
Yep.
And I have advised in the past is like, you know, if you have to throw in just a quick 2 or 3 sentence conclusion because you're running out of time, that's fine. But I'm thinking back to my own experience as a reader now, and realizing that often, you know, things wouldn't have conclusions there, and they would still score pretty well as long as they had, you know, significant claims and evidence. It might work against them in the sophistication point, but then if you look very strictly at the rubric, you know, the absence of a conclusion is not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
But if you have time to write a good one, obviously do so.
For sure.
That seems obvious. But you know, or at least, you know, cap it off with you know, 1 or 2 sentences that basically, as we say, restate the argument, and hopefully in a slightly different way. But even that doesn't matter. Just, you know, I don't know.
Right.
The conclusion's always controversial because some folks will, you know, what have I run out of time?
Yeah.
By then you've already developed the argument. The conclusion mostly helps, as you said, it's the last thing they remember. But it definitely contributes towards the sophistication point because it gives this holistic sense of, God, this was a really well-written essay, you know, like something you spent several hours on instead of 45 minutes.
Yeah, right. And you know, that's something that we want to think about too, is the idea that if the conclusion is not going to add anything, just cut it, you know?
Yeah.
And because you're going to get the most from bang for your buck from your thesis and your argument. Okay, a couple things here. Once again, people are still asking about evidence. Like I said, when it comes to the first person pronouns, Coach, I totally agree with you, right? The idea of first person pronouns. Some prompts are just tailor-made for you to write only about yourself. And if that, like, folks, the one thing that I want to point out is that you need to be flexible tomorrow. You need to trust in your skills and be flexible. And the reason why is because some prompts are perfect to write about only yourself. Other prompts are actually better to write about what you know about politics, what you know about history, what you know about public policy. I mean, even just a few weeks ago, it was what's the value of striving for perfection? Well, if you want to write about, you know, meeting your parents' ideals and getting a 4.0, you can write all about you. You could write a story about you meeting your parents', you know, hopes for you, if you actually really care about that or not, and your best friend who strives for a 4.0. That's a fine paper. But somebody else might want to bring in, you know, what's this idea of perfection in the media, and maybe that's not worth striving for. That's an entirely different argument because the evidence is different. And that person's like, I'm going to use something different for evidence. So when you pick your evidence, you just need to know your categories. The other question that I've seen a bunch. First of all, if you're telling a story about yourself with evidence, you're going to say I. So yes, the answer is you could say I. When your teachers tell you not to say I, what they really mean is don't say I think, in my opinion, I believe. Because that means nothing, right? I could say I think that Tim Freitas is a scumbox, or I could say Tim Freitas is a scumbox. When I say Tim Freitas is a scumbox, that's way more powerful. Okay, so that's what the no using I means. But when you're telling a story about yourself, use the first person pronoun. It's totally fine. Okay? The other thing that I wanted to point out, if I can remember what I was thinking about, something about evidence, commentary, argument.
we're getting lots of questions about sophistication. So could you tackle
Yeah.
that one really quickly?
All right, I will. I will deal with sophistication. And Tom, if you have anything to add, just always chime in. Don't forget. And so sophistication, for the argument prompt, what you can do for sophistication is as follows. Number one, you can have a vivid and persuasive style. What that means is that you have a really strong vocab and that you have great sentence structure. So that means your essay could be actually kind of mediocre in terms of your reasoning, but because you've got such a good vocabulary or because your writing mechanics are so awesome, you'll get the sophistication point. Another one is putting the argument into a broader context. And that right there typically comes from your knowledge of how does this evidence relate to the world around me? And that is written throughout your paper. Another way to earn the sophistication point is to write a strong counter-argument paragraph if it is allowed. A counter-argument paragraph does not guarantee you the sophistication point. I would hate for kids to be like, I can get the sophistication point by writing a counter-argument paragraph. If you only write a counter-argument paragraph and you don't then support your actual main argument, you're toast. That's not going to get you the sophistication point. The problem with sophistication is I think that a lot of kids want a checklist for sophistication, and it's not something that you can just checklist. I can checklist a thesis. Even if the thesis sucks, I can be like, it's there, boom, there's my check. When it says specific evidence and commentary, I can see that that's there, check and check. But sophistication, if I see a counter argument, it needs to be effective. So when you say, what does an effective counter argument look like? I'll tell you. An effective counter argument is you provide the evidence and the reasoning for why the other side thinks they're correct, and then you explain why their reasoning is incorrect and how it actually supports your argument better. That's a strong counter argument. But not every argument prompt allows for that, and not every synthesis prompt allows for that. So I would hate for someone to go in tomorrow and be like, I have to write a counter argument. No, you are better off supporting your main argument the whole time if you can't think of a counter argument that you can really kind of destroy there.
Yeah, absolutely. Just prove your point. Like, that's the gist of it.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Let me see here.
I think we're starting to get some synthesis questions.
Good.
Because I'm seeing stuff about sources. So why don't we maybe move on to that one if that's okay?
I think that's a perfectly awesome idea. Okay. Here we go. Coach, we'll take it away, and then we'll shift down to you, Tom. Coach, take it away.
All right. So you guys probably already know, but synthesis, you're going to get approximately 6 sources. And you're going to need to use those sources to support your argument. Don't summarize the sources. Now, generally speaking, there are different ways to kind of read through the sources a bit more quickly because you don't have a ton of time to do that. So we want to make sure that, first of all, don't be intimidated by a long source. I've heard students say, oh, it's too long, I don't want to read that. But then when I go and read the source, I'm like, oh, it's full of a lot of really good info. So you want to be looking for like facts or statistics or examples that could help prove your point. Usually you're going to get a visual text, so it could be a graph or a cartoon or a photo, and those are usually a little bit easier to analyze quickly. So you want to make sure that even if you're skimming the sources, that you're moving relatively quickly, and if you're able to take annotations, I would say kind of keep track of, the main idea of each source, because I know a lot of teachers advocate for kind of trying to assert a position, a tentative one, before you approach the sources. And I do think there's benefit to that, but sometimes the prompts are a little bit obscure and students don't really have an opinion on it before they read the sources. So depending on what you're asked tomorrow, the thing to remember is that you need to make an argument, and then you need to use at least 3 sources to help you support that argument. And I saw a question about citing sources that hopefully I can address quickly.
All right. But while you plan that out, just super quick, right? I'm going to interrupt for 1 second because a lot of the questions, right? You and I both have videos
Yes.
about all of these questions. And if you toss our videos into double speed, you can actually get through a decent amount of them tonight. So please note, the Garden of English, right? Like and subscribe. And then Coach Hall writes, like and subscribe. We do have videos that answer a lot of these questions. Because right now, like, we have so many questions coming in, and we're trying to do this live, and we're trying to help you, I promise, right? And Tom, I am so thankful for how much you're cranking away over there. Like,
that's fine. Sorry about the quackity quack.
No, it's awesome. I love it. My point here, though, folks, is that a lot of your questions when you're like, how do I write a thesis? Well, Coach Hall and I have templates for that, right? And a lot of times our templates are in the descriptions underneath. I have gone through every single essay type and said, here's how you write your thesis, here's how you pick your evidence, here's how you write your body paragraph, here's how you write a strong conclusion. Coach Hall has done stuff that's very similar. So if you look through our videos, you can get all this information that we may not cover with you. I want to remind people that at 9 p.m., Marco Learning is going live, and they're going to talk about test taking with multiple choice in the digital interface as well. Okay, so Coach, I'm sorry for interrupting. Here we go. Back to you.
Okay, so someone asked about like skimming. So everybody has a different method of this, but like, yes, you want to look at where the source was from. And you can read the topic sentences or maybe like the first and last sentence of each paragraph. So like topic and concluding sentence if you're skimming, but in general, you do want to just try to read quickly. But I do recognize that for some students, there's different methods that they use to kind of try to save time. So as far as the sources.
Can I talk about the time saving just real quick?
Yes.
Okay, so a couple of things to save time. First of all, I encourage, you have to have a minimum of 3 sources in your paper. I encourage my students to have 4. But 3 is the minimum. And I tell my kids, once you have your 4, if you haven't read the last 2 sources, because you know you can read the first 4, then you stop. Don't even read the last 2. It's going to save you time. Another way to save time with the reading of the sources, I tell my kids to read the intro paragraph and the conclusion paragraph of the source and any topic sentences, because then they'll know what the piece is actually about and if they want to read the whole thing. And if they're like, oh no, I ain't going to use that, that's where they can get all their information and then flip to the next. Anyway, sorry, Coach, I just interrupted you again.
It's okay. But yeah, if you know you're not going to use the source, like stop reading it, stop wasting your time.
Yeah.
Now for the sources themselves, when you're citing them, I think we talked about this on our last live, but we generally recommend that you don't say things like according to source A, just because it is technically citing the source, but it does sound a little bit less sophisticated. So there's a couple solutions to this. You can actually reference the original author of the source or where it originally came from. Because remember, the title of source A, the College Board just assigned that to the piece. Like it means nothing. So let's say it's a study from that was published in Forbes magazine. You could say, according to a recent study from Forbes magazine. And then at the end of that sentence, you could put a parenthetical citation, which is when you put like source A in parentheses. Yeah. So just remember that we don't want to like lead in with according to source A if we could avoid it. Is it wrong? No, but is there a better way? Yes.
So just a little tip about that too. I tell my students, if they're going to put source A in the sentence, so let's say they say according to source A, they better follow that with the credentials of source A.
Yes.
And the reason why is because that's why we're saying source A in the first place. So the only time that you want to say source A instead of, let's say, the author's last name, or let's say it's from Newsweek magazine or whatever, is if the author's last name is something like Smitty Manyangerman Jensen. And yes, folks, he is number 1. But you don't want to recopy that over and over and over. But it is important, if you're going to put the source's name in the sentence, that you put the credentials of the source after, because that's what you're actually relying on. If I were to say, let me think of like, what's polio, because that doesn't even like exist anymore. If I were to say that, Johnny said that I had polio, you all would be like, who cares? Who's Johnny? Maybe it's some little kid who's just heard that and thought it was a mean thing and was like, you've got polio, But if I all of a sudden say, Johnny, my doctor, says I have polio, that makes this a lot more intense. So if you're going to actually put the source's name or the source in your sentence, you need to have a comma, tell me what the credentials are, and a non-essential. That would be perfect for that. So anyway, Coach, back to you, and then we'll go down to Tom for some synthesis stuff.
Sure. So someone asked, I think this is a good question, like, do we have to give the credential and the parenthetical citation? Technically, no, but I like to see it because I look for the parenthetical citations. That's just me, but it's easier for me to find those. Now, as a reader, we're going to go back and look and double check that you have 3 sources, but any little thing like that you can do to make the person's life a little easier as they're reading your essay, I say go for it. Yeah. And with synthesis, I think it's kind of important to remember to put sources in conversation with each other. And I know this is kind of like a confusing topic when people hear that phrase. So when we have conversations, we either build off of what somebody has already said, we add new information, we might politely disagree and explain why, but a conversation, right? So instead of summarizing the sources, we want to put the sources in conversation with each other. So it could be that 2 sources have the same main idea or perspective. They could have contradicting perspectives. So You don't have to cite 2 sources per paragraph, but a lot of times that does lead to a more successful essay because you're showing the relationship and maybe even possible tensions among those perspectives. So that's just something to keep in mind as well, is that we want to analyze and really think, okay, like, why does this issue matter? Even if it's an issue that you've not really thought of. Like, I was actually really excited when they released the paper exam prompts and it was about handwriting, because I'm like, okay, most students probably have an opinion on this. But like the wind farm prompt from 2019, like, I can tell you that none of my students had thought about the factors of a wind farm before
Right.
that prompt. But you still have to have some sort of position on it. So we want to make sure that we're like looking at the general question of why does this really matter? And one of the things I love about how the College Board does their prompts is they give you that little like context paragraph where they tell you the different perspectives on the issue. So use that to your advantage as well. There's going to be like little bullet points where it tells you like you need a defensible thesis and all that stuff. Tomorrow, you don't need to read that. That's just putting the rubric in bullet points. But what you do want to make sure you do is read the context paragraph and also read the part where it actually gives you your prompt, because you want to make sure you're actually answering the question being asked.
Yeah.
Because I have seen that happen a few times where kids sort of think they knew what they were supposed to write about, but then they took it in a different direction. So that would be something to kind of like slow down tomorrow and make sure you understand exactly what they're asking you to write about.
All right, super cool. I just saw a question about qualifiers. Should I say it is true or it might be true? Honestly, qualified language is best unless you know that it is absolutely true. So qualified language is just like, it seems like Beth Hall and I are friends, or I could say, oh, Beth Hall and I are actually friends, right? And Tom, you and I have actually been becoming friends over the last couple weeks. And so now it could be like, well, it seems like Freitas and Tom are actually friends. Well, no, I'm like, heck, let's do a live together. You know what I mean? So we are friends. So I don't want to say it seems like we're friends. No, we are. And because of that, it depends on, like, you need to really think about the choice that you have to make, folks, right? Do I know this to be true, or does it seem to be true? I can say that there's a McDonald's on every corner, but that's not true. Why? Because this is the corner of my phone, and there ain't no McDonald's there, right? So I want to say it seems like there are McDonald's on every corner. But, Tom, I know that you're clacking away on those keys,
Yeah,
which is
sorry,
awesome.
folks.
But the best part about that is, right, is that now I'm going to call you out and say, hey, tell me what you have. Like, what's the number one or two things that you're like, synthesis, got to know it, got to do it. What do we got?
Okay, I do want to reinforce what Beth or Coach Hall was saying. Particularly, as a matter of fact, I see her name just zip by. Sophia Donovan did a sample synthesis essay, and that was one of the things that she had done was, she had the source, in the parenthetical, and also had the actual, in an article in the Guardian, source A, which was really good, and that's also gives that has you on the road to the sophistication point. What I would say is make sure you are consistent, though. If you're going to be doing that with these sources, like if you're going to say Guardian article source A, make sure for newspaper article source B, scientific study source C. Now, on second reference, if you go back to source A, maybe just say source A again, because at least the reader will know, hey, you did cite it. I mean, the readers all know these sources, believe me. The synthesis essay readers will know these sources. Just don't ask them about windmills.
Oh my gosh! Oh, synthesis. I've been stuck on synthesis for like the last 3 times I've gone, and I'm just like, all right, enough of the synthesis. I'm ready for argument or rhetorical analysis again.
It's because only the truly brilliant readers can handle doing synthesis time and time again, right?
Oh my gosh!
The one thing I don't think we've mentioned, it is or maybe Coach Hall did mention this, the most important point, the most important part of the synthesis essay, you've got to remember to use at least 3 sources.
Yes.
If you do not use 3 sources, you can do the most brilliant essay in the world, and you only cite 2 sources, I don't think you're going to score more than 2 or 3 points.
Yeah, no, actually, if you only cite 2 sources, the highest you can score is a 1-1-0. You
1-1-0.
You cannot get a 1. You can't even get a 1-2-0. So a 2 for evidence and commentary
And you're not
unless you
gonna
have
get the
3 sources.
sophistication point, right?
Absolutely not.
So,
You could write the
yeah.
best paper on the planet. You put 2 sources in there, boom, 1-1-0.
So,
You gotta
and then
get 3 in there.
when I present synthesis essay to my students, I will obnoxiously say, how many sources again? I will say it over and over again. And in the synthesis essay, the 2 timed writings, or the one non-timed and the one synthesis essay that we did, like maybe 95% of the students got it. In other words, I had 3 sources, and some people will say, well, if I throw in more sources, will I get higher points, or will I get the sophistication point? I don't know what Coach Hall and Tim have to say about that. I don't think using more sources necessarily strengthens your essay unless it actually is relevant. In other words,
That's right.
don't go
It's
in there.
all about the argument.
Yeah, exactly. Don't go in there and say, I'm going to pull in 2 extra ones just to make sure. It doesn't really matter if your argument is garbage.
Yeah.
Not that any of you out there would ever write a garbage
That's
argument.
right.
I'm sorry.
I think the whole sources thing comes from history, because I think
Yes.
in one of the history classes they have to try to use it, or they get an extra
You have
point
to
if
use
they do.
7 of the 8 in
Yeah.
English.
Yeah, that's
Like,
got to
that's
be
not
like
how it
human
works for us.
geo, I think, or I don't know.
Yeah.
A human geo or world history. Anyway, only at least 3 sources, folks. Remember that. Know it, love it, be it. You tattoo it on the inside of your eyelids.
That's right. I actually have it
because
tattooed on my
it's
arms.
the quickest way to, destroy a perfectly wonderful synthesis essay. And the only other thing I would say, let's see, I echoed Coach Hall's point, the 3 sources of the essay. Oh, anyway, what I was saying, sorry, Sophia, I called you out and didn't go through with it. It's like your argument looked really great. And I was going to send you this email before I got really late today. But just to keep it consistent, in other words, like here you're using the both of them, and then here you're not. I don't know that that's going to necessarily bring your score down, that a reader's going to necessarily not, or is going to, it's like, well, you weren't consistent in the way you were citing the sources. You were doing it one way and doing the other.
We don't
it
even
just
care.
looks, I was going to say, we don't care, but it looks better if you do. And it's a simple thing to remember.
You know what's so funny about that, Tom? What I tell my kids is I tell them, like, think about a really nice classic old car. For me, that's the 57 Chevy Bel Air. And now paint it a nice, beautiful midnight black. And then all of a sudden put flames on it, like on the hood. And I ask them, do the flames actually make the car run better? Mm-mm. But do they make it look better? You better believe it.
Yeah.
And so because of that, right, I think that's the kind of thing that you're suggesting here is that, be consistent with your citations, and that makes it easier for us, and it does make it look better. And because of that, it's the argument will still run the same way, but it'll have that little extra look of something that we would like for sure.
And again, I would just echo that again, picking on my student Sophia Donovan for this is like, no, it doesn't really matter. I think if your commentary tends towards the repetitive and the way you're connecting it back to the thesis, as long as you're, again, as we talked about, if your essay is very workmanlike or technical, if your argument is solid, it would be nice if you had the flames on the car.
Yeah.
But don't sweat it if you don't.
Yeah.
That beautiful Bel Air without the flames is
Still
running on the
beautiful.
inside just as strongly, as long as the engine is tuned up and it's got seats and not a rusted out floor.
Yeah, right.
It's gonna get you where you want to go in style.
And it's funny. Like I run teacher trainings and whatnot, and I tell teachers about like this kind of formulaic essay, and I'm like, look, I can template the essay for my kids, and a lot of times they might even get all 6 points because of how thorough it is.
Yeah.
And then teachers are like, no, that doesn't make any sense. It's going to be too repetitive. And I'm like, I bet I can write a repetitive essay and still have you say, wow, that's good writing. And then I show it to them and they're like, oh, wow, that is good writing. And I'm like, look, although we want to teach kids to move away from that, I want them to know how to write first and what that means. And this is actually going to lead into a question that I'm going to answer. I've seen this show up a bunch, right? How do you write faster? How do you write faster? And what will help you write faster is knowing what each part of an essay does, folks, okay? So I'm going to go through what each part of an essay does for you all. And the reason why is because if you know what is happening in these parts of the essay, you'll know how each part functions to make it so that it flows perfectly. The first thing you need to know is that you need to have a thesis. That's going to state your claim that answers the prompt that's in front of you. For every body paragraph, you want to have 3 parts to it. The first part is going to be the topic sentence. So how do I know I'm writing quickly enough? I look at my prompt and I'm like, I need to answer that question. I'm going to write my thesis, which is my argument. That's what is going to guide my whole paper. Nothing I write will go outside of that thesis statement. I get to my first body paragraph. I know what a topic sentence does. A topic sentence should have some element of transitional language, which is like why am I starting here, or why am I now moving to this paragraph? It's going to have a reference to where my example is coming from, and it's going to tie it to my argument. So that's my topic sentence, because now I'm going to say, I'm going to describe my example in detail here. And then I'm going to provide my commentary. And my commentary is going to say, this example that I described relates to my argument because. And if you know that that's how paragraphs function, and they all fall under the umbrella of your thesis, that's how you're going to write the most quickly. Because you know what each part of your sentence does, or what each part of your paragraph does, and what each part of your essay does. And if you want help with thesis statements and body paragraphs, by all means, make sure that you go check out Coach Hall or me, because we have broken that all down for you for such, okay? So that's the quickest way for you to know. I'm also continuously seeing questions about counter arguments and qualifying and whatnot. Folks, do not qualify on your AP exam. Qualifying sophisticated, absolutely, right? But on exam day and crunch time, pick a side, folks.
Yes, please.
Oh my gosh.
It's like, well, can we argue both sides? It's like, yes, if you're brilliant and you have plenty of time. I mean,
yeah,
you don't have plenty. You're already brilliant, but you don't have plenty of time.
Right, and also,
You know?
even if you argue both sides, you need to come to your conclusion at the very end and say, but this one's more persuasive. Someone actually has asked a couple times about is having two sources in the first paragraph, then a source for the confession, but I think it's concession, and then a source for the refutation. If you're structuring your argument that way, you don't want to go in thinking you're going to structure your argument that way, because honestly, the best way to structure your argument is to have your thesis and two body paragraphs for support. I would want everybody going in with that mindset, and then say, I'll add a counter argument if it's available, but support your argument. Don't always think concession, refutation. You don't have to. That's not what you need to do in 40 minutes. Coach, looks like you have something to say about that.
Yeah, I think sometimes like we need to separate what we do in class with what we do on the exam, because, you know, the prompts are going to be different. It's going to be a cold read. You haven't seen these before, and that adds extra pressure. So if you think you could do a good concession or refutation, go for it. But if that's not going to be the way that gets you those points on the rubric, then do what we've talked about. Do that intro and those two body paragraphs supporting it. And with the qualified argument, I might have a different interpretation of qualified than other people, but I have seen students do kind of like, it works in these situations, but not these situations type of thing. And as long as your argument's clear, it's fine, but we don't want to try to do something crazy fancy on exam day. We want to stick to like what we know will be successful. Because I know a lot of people want to earn that sophistication point, but at the end of the day, you got to remember, we're looking for your thesis. We're looking at your evidence and commentary, and we want you to have a clear, logical argument. And sometimes under pressure, you know, there's a lot of things going on exam day. We don't want to necessarily try something fancy just like as a hope and a prayer. Like we want to make sure we're actually putting together a coherent argument.
All right. I see a couple people in here asking questions about if you lose points. Folks, you don't lose points on the AP exam. You just gain points. We read to reward.
We reward what you do well.
That's right. Absolutely, right? And I mean, Tom, how often do we hear that through the reading process? Like, reward the kids for what they do well.
Yeah, even if and I'm seeing some questions. Sorry, Tim, I cut you off.
No, that's quite all right.
I'm seeing some questions like, what about, bad grammar, spelling? Yeah. Misspelling is not going to be a problem unless it's so egregious that it detracts from the readability. Like the reader can't figure out what you're writing. The grammar, unless, it's so confusing that it detracts from readability. Readability. A few grammatical mistakes and spelling errors here and there are not going to. It doesn't take away points. It's just. And I can't remember what it was from the 9-point rubric, what the phraseology, but I just simply stick to if it distracts from readability.
Yeah. So now on our rubric for evidence and commentary, if the grammar distracts from how readable it is, you can still earn up to 3 of the 4 points. So that means if I get what you're saying, but the grammar is kind of like really mishmashed, I can actually give you that third point, but not the 4th. So I might even know that your argument is solid and strong, but if the grammar detracts, I can only award you up to 3.
Yeah, up to 3 points. Yeah.
But this is a draft, so we try to ignore things that show up if you could go back and rewrite it, you would fix all this stuff, I actually, for those of you that are asking questions about like how things are scored and whatnot, there's a video on the Garden of English channel that says what readers want you to know before you test. I encourage you
I
to
just looked at that today. Yeah.
I encourage you to read that tonight because I have a actual exam leader on there with me, and she's the one that asked me to make the video because she was like, let's really just talk about getting these kids to not have so much anxiety for that. For the sake of time, I think that we should shift to rhetorical analysis because Marco Learning goes live at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and I want to be done for them because they help support us and get people here, and I want to make sure that we can say, hey, go check out Marco because they're going to really focus on the electronic parts of the exam. So, all right, here we go. Rhetorical analysis, and let's take it away. What do we have? Rhetorical analysis. Coach, we're going to start with you again.
All right, awesome. So rhetorical analysis is probably my favorite essay.
No, it's my favorite essay.
Like, in fact, I wrote like an ebook on rhetorical analysis. So it's my favorite, which means I probably won't get to ever read the rhetorical analysis essay on the exam because of karma. But just before we start getting a lot of these questions, both Garden of English and Coach Hall writes, we've done videos on like various topics, like which strategies do you need to know, or devices or choices and things like that. So please go ahead and check out those videos on our channels as well. And like he said earlier, you can listen to us on like 2x speed, and it probably sounds terrible, but you get more information faster. Yeah. But I think the thing to remember for rhetorical analysis is you're going to have a passage. It's likely it could be a speech or a letter, but who knows? It could be an article or the foreword to a nonfiction book. But regardless, you want to really look at what is the author doing and why are they doing it? I feel like that's as simple as we can break it down. Yeah. And I tend to encourage students to try to look at the passage chronologically because
I do too, yeah.
Yeah, because the author has a line of reasoning in their passage. So you want to try to follow that as opposed to turning it into almost like a scavenger hunt. And the other thing is we're asked all the time, like, okay, what are the most common choices?
Yeah.
And we could probably give you a list. I did make a video on it. But here's the thing, you don't want to go into it looking for certain choices, right? Like just because you've read stuff in class with repetition, it doesn't mean that you're going to have repetition on the exam. So you want to really ask yourself, okay, what are they doing? And it's not always as simple as repetition. It could be that they're trying to flatter somebody, or maybe they're trying to create a common enemy because they want to rally people to war. Yeah. So even though it's good to have like a list in your mind of common choices, you really want to make sure that you're not using that as like a way to color your reading of the passage, because sometimes there are passages where my own students have told me like it's really hard to find the rhetorical choices because it's not what they're used to. And I always ask them, okay, so take a step back. What are they doing? Yeah. And then if they answer that question, that's probably what they need to be writing about. So we want to make sure that we're not like trying to project onto the passage. And then I think the big thing for me as far as rhetorical analysis is that rhetorical situation. So why are they making that particular choice for that particular audience on that occasion, right? Because they're customizing their letter or their speech or their article to a certain group of people for a reason. And so we want to make sure we're figuring out why they're doing that.
So I'm going to go back to this question, which is, can you list out some of the common rhetorical choices? That's going to show up again and again. And the truth is, folks, we can't. And I'm going to tell you why. Because I think what you want me to actually answer is, what are the common rhetorical devices? And you want me to say metaphor and simile and repetition and parallel structure. The problem is, that's not what you're asked to write about. What you're asked to write about are rhetorical choices. And the difference between a rhetorical device and a rhetorical choice is that one is a noun, that's a rhetorical device, and one is a verb. That's a rhetorical choice. Now, what that means is this. The easiest way to write about rhetorical choices, is you can write about anything the speaker is doing, as Coach said. But let me just give you an example of what this means. I have my wedding ring right here. This is a noun. This is a device that conveys meaning. But I don't say Tim Freitas uses his wedding ring to convey that he's married. I can't do that because I can use my wedding ring right now to do a magic trick, right? But that doesn't convey that I'm married. What I need to do is I need to wear my wedding ring. That's when it conveys that I'm married. So when we talk about rhetorical choices, what you want to do, folks, is you want to just say, here's what the author's doing, and you put the choice in there, right? So I've got my friend McDuff right here, and y'all are like, that's weird, right?
Oh, no,
and so
he's
now,
back.
Oh, wow.
I already know where this is going.
I'm gonna kiss him, and I'm going to rub beards with him, and y'all are like, wow, Freitas is super weird, right? I'm not using pathos, folks. I'm not even going to say the word pathos when I write about this. What's the choice that I made? The choice that I made was I kissed a mannequin head, and then I made you all think I was a weirdo. What happens there is I just got you all a little bit uncomfortable, and I did that on purpose. And I wanted you to have that emotional response. But to write about that rhetorically, I say Tim Freitas kisses a mannequin head in order to get people uncomfortable. That is how you write a rhetorical analysis. So don't think you have to just search for metaphors and parallel structure. Now, let's say that's what you're trained to do. That's okay. But I want to encourage you, if you find a metaphor, don't say uses a metaphor. I want you to put the verb compares there. The author compares blank with blank in order to. Or if you see parallel structure or repetition, I want you to say the author repeats this in order to. And you're going to write a much better paper. Tom, what do you think?
Sorry, catching some questions here in the chat. It's like you do that on purpose.
I did. Every time. I'm so sorry.
So yeah, I mean, if nothing else, I'll just, pretend like I know something by just simply echoing what you said. It used to be, when I first started teaching AP Lang, or I first heard about people teaching AP Lang, you would cover the rhetorical devices, and there would be like 50 of them that you want students to memorize.
Yep.
You think that I'm kidding, but I mean, Aristotle cataloged what, like 200 or 300?
For sure.
If you go to, what is it, Silva Rhetoricae, that's still out there online.
Yep.
I mean, the website is huge. But that website also hasn't been updated since, like, I don't know, 2003. And that we have been basically telling people, don't focus on the rhetorical devices. Yes, it makes you look smart if you can use, what is a chiasmus, in this particular
Anadiplosis,
passage.
Hippophora.
Yeah, anadiplosis, yes. Gandhi's use of chiasmus in this sentence is effective because it forces the reader to think on the feelings being expressed, or it forces the viceroy to focus on this and think about that. It's like, yeah, that sounds kind of great, but you could just simply have skipped chiasmus by saying the way the reversal of phrase works. And I was just telling this to my students this morning, is the way to go. And again, all I'm doing is something that's a little less awkward and creepy than, kissing a mannequin head by making the exact same point. What would I tell people to focus on in rhetorical analysis? Again, make sure that you definitely got to have a solid thesis. That's the one key advice for every single essay. And again, everybody says, well, that's obvious. It's like, no. I saw, hundreds out of the 1,700 essays I graded or scored 2 years ago of essays that didn't have theses or theses. But everything else worked fine, or it didn't work fine in the essay because that thesis guides your argument, and this is maybe repeating what I said before on, I guess, the argumentative essay, is once you know what somebody will say, well, give me something that I know I can jump in and focus on. You're giving me this nebulous advice because you don't know what the passages are going to look like. Yeah. And, Tim emphasized that. Tone.
Yeah,
typically,
for sure, always.
Tone is almost always, you can find, because an author or speaker or writer, anything that they're doing, more often than not, they've got a particular tone in what they are doing, because that is key to, their style, and that is key to, whatever approach or methods they're using to convince the audience of their purpose or the audience of their argument. Yeah. Tone is good. I'm sorry, go ahead, Tim.
I'm going to just jump in on 2 parts of tone, right? So when you are writing about tone, you could say the author does blank to create a blank tone.
Blank tone,
right.
Yes.
Or you could say the author shifts his or her tone in order to, and then tell us why. But one of the things about rhetorical analysis, folks, that will actually make this essay much easier for you, I think, is when you read that essay, when you're done, if you say what the purpose is, so you get done with it and you're like, okay, the author wants the audience to understand this message, and when they understand that, they should do this. If you can say that at the very end, they want the audience to understand this and do this, the next thing you do is you find 3 pieces of text that got you to that understanding, and you explain how those 3 pieces of text got you to, here's how this text conveys his message, and here's why this would move his audience to then act on it. 3 pieces of text. So if you find the purpose first and then work backwards, there you go. That's the easiest way to find stuff. The only thing that you need to do is you need to say what he's doing in the text that you found. What's up, Coach?
I'm just like trying to respond as quickly as I can.
Yeah.
I know.
A lot of questions. So I keep
Yeah,
looking
lots
down.
of
If I'm looking
questions,
down,
yeah.
it's because I'm following the chat on my phone. Someone asked, like, if our teacher taught us devices, is that wrong?
No,
Not
okay.
necessarily. Like, we're not trying to contradict anyone's previous, like, whole year of teaching.
Right.
But here's the thing. If you do put devices in your thesis, it's still technically defensible. So let's not stress out about that right now. You also want to make sure, though, that the prompt is going to ask you about one of three things: the message, the purpose, or the argument.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that you're emphasizing that as well. Just to make sure that it's clear in your thesis what you're going to be talking about. And you want to tie your analysis back to that as well. And as far as like when they use those terms, it really depends. But like, you know, a eulogy, like a funeral speech or a commencement speech, that's probably going to have more of a message. But if it's, let's say like a speech where they're trying to get people to go to war, that's probably going to be more of a purpose or an argument. So it really just depends on the passage itself. So really be mindful of what they're asking you to look for. Also, we've gotten a few questions about soapstone versus space cat. They're
That doesn't
very
matter,
similar.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
do one or the other, don't worry about that. But those are to help you to understand the rhetorical situation. So if you've never heard of space cat, don't freak out. It's okay.
Yeah. All right. So hold on 1 second. Man, this is ridiculous. All right. So anyway, we are at about 8:56. Okay. And someone asked about the difference between message and tone. Listen, folks, tone is the speaker's attitude towards whatever he or she is talking about. The message is what is the actual argument the speaker wants the audience to understand. And then what you're trying to do in a rhetorical analysis is you're trying to explain how does the author build his argument or her argument to be meaningful, to convey this understanding so that the people will then do something. And a lot of times that do is, you know, it doesn't mean that people are going to go out and vote or go out and go to war. It might just be reconsider how they think about someone. It might be, or reconsider how they think about a topic or something like that. So it might be something big and it might not. And that's okay. But please remember, Coach Hall and I have videos about rhetorical analysis that walk you through all of this here. Tom, do you have a YouTube page, by the way? If you have a YouTube channel, I'm happy
God,
to...
no.
All right, there you go. Right, there you go. All right.
I'm not hip enough for that.
Gotcha. Okay, I was saying, because I'm happy to plug it here, or Teachers Pay Teachers or something like that.
Nope,
But,
nope.
I'm going to leave you with final advice, and then Tom, I'll let you leave some, and then Beth will finish up with you. But my final advice is this. Folks, you have skills. Go in and trust your skills tomorrow. And if you don't get the score that you want, guess what? You are still a valuable human being. And I don't want you to ever think that your identity is defined by that number, because that is not what makes you you, okay? Go do your best. Give it your best shot. Make sure that you comment on this video how much you owned it, by the way, because I'm sure that you will, right? But once again, you are a human being. You are not a number that a test gives you. So please, please, please remember that. Tom, final advice.
Again, you always wait till I'm
I'm right in the middle of typing again. I'm so sorry.
He's going at it in the chat. He's answering
yeah,
a
I'm
lot.
trying, but there's
There's a lot.
a lot of weirdness going on in there too. Get some sleep.
Yes.
You know,
Oh, great
in other
advice.
words, yeah, I was gonna say, you know, should I be? One of my students asked me today, Carter, if you're out there, is what, you know, should I be doing any kind of practice batteries or working on this or doing the practice exam and the app? It's like, no, not the night before.
Yeah, right.
Look at whatever, you know, maybe inventory your resources that you have. You know, if there's stuff that you're going to be using tomorrow that you know you use on your computer that you're going to use to supplement your performance on the essay or the essays, in other words, any kind of outlines or templates or whatever, print them out because you're not going to be able to access them through the app. If you were taking the paper writing test, you would not have access to this.
Yeah.
But, you know, like any of the templates that I've given to any of my students, I've told them, you know, print it out, have it right beside you, but don't get too distracted by those because like Tim said, you've already got the skills. You pretty much already know what you need to bring there.
Yeah.
Get some sleep, get something decent to eat, but maybe don't toss down 5 or 6 Krispy Kreme donuts.
Yeah, right.
Not so much.
Right.
Although I always take donuts to my students when we have the live exams, but I tell them no more than 2 because then you have a sugar crash halfway through. Oh, remember, you guys are going to get a break. Those of you who haven't already taken an AP exam, there's a break somewhere during the exam, right?
Yeah,
If
there
you-
is.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Essays.
Yeah, between multiple choice and the essays, there will be a little bit of a break, so you got to
Yeah,
make sure
yeah.
that you monitor that. Just one thing, real quick, Tom.
Go ahead.
In terms of printing stuff out, I think that they do have to agree that they will only bring a sheet of blank note paper.
Okay.
So just
Yeah, I
heads
wasn't
up on that.
clear on what, because I
Yeah.
know that.
So just make sure you read that, because whatever you agree to, you are putting your name on that. And
That is true.
I had a student who asked me about argument. Can we make up statistics for argument? And
No,
the short answer actually is yes, because there's no AP police. However, I always tell my students, look, that really depends on your character. Who are you as a person? And if you're okay with that, I can't have your conscience, but I know that I would never make up a statistic to support my argument because that's unethical. But so I do agree with you. The answer should be no, right? But there is no AP police. But anyway,
I was going to say nobody's going to know,
Right.
but you'll know.
right. And so the only thing is, like I said, just check what you're agreeing to for those notes, because I'm not entirely sure about that part. But I totally agree with everything else that you said. So that's that. All right, Coach, our last bit, and I'm going to continue to post the Marco stuff in the chat, and I'll shut up after that.
All right, awesome. Well, first of all, I want to echo what you guys have said about it's just one test. It doesn't define you. Do the best you can. Don't get defeated from the start, because I've had so many kids come out of the exam saying like, oh, it wasn't so good. And then they got their scores and it was actually fine. So, just take each part of the test for what it is. When you're focusing on multiple choice, focus on multiple choice. When you have your essays, focus on that essay that you're doing. And then when you move on, then you move on, right? We don't dwell on the other areas of the test. I still see that there's a lot of questions coming in. So I know a lot of you are hopefully going to go to Marco after this. Also, I think, do you still do TikTok on
Me?
yours as well?
Me? No. I gave that up. TikTok is not for me. That is all you, Coach. Oh my
Okay,
gosh.
I have
And all
a
Tom. Tom does tons of TikTok, I heard.
No, but maybe I should. That'll be, like I know since you guys, Coach Hall's about to say she's there, but
Yeah.
I will take over the AP Lang TikTok world. Yes.
But I actually have a TikTok, and I try to answer questions on there too. And it's usually easy to do like a 15-second thing. So if you guys haven't already followed both Coach Hallwright's Garden of English, check us out there. Go watch those old videos if you feel like you want to cram.
Yeah.
I try to respond to my comments as well. And I'm in a different time zone than I think both of you are. So I'm going to be up for a couple more hours. So if you guys want to ask questions, I'll do my best to answer them, because it's me putting off grading essays.
I know.
So,
I love doing that.
Yes.
And folks, just a couple final things here. The link to Marco is just their YouTube channel in general, so click on that. Their live video will show up pretty soon. So when they go live, that video pops right up and it says that they're live now, and that's the one that you want to actually click on, right? Tom and Beth, I am so grateful that you would spend an hour and a half with me as we try to help other kids all around the globe. I mean, that's humbling that you would even give up your time for me like that. I'm just so grateful, and thank you so much.
Well, and thanks to everybody who came and watched.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you guys are, putting in the effort before your test. So really the props goes to the students, I think.
Yeah, that's true too, right? So thank you all so much.
And
All right.
a quick shout out to all the teachers out there that are in the
Yes.
chat that have been fielding lots of these questions that we did not catch.
Yes. Thank you for
Ms.
everybody
Lotto
involved.
out there, and I didn't see where the other one. But yeah, this has been awesome. I'm glad I did this.
Awesome. Thank you. You guys all have a great night. I'm going to end the stream, but Coach and Tom, feel free to stay on super quick for stay in the Zoom, okay?
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.